everybody, and welcome to another edition of In Pit Lane, coming to you from the isolation chamber here beyond the suburban curtain in beautiful parts unknown. Hope you're coping with your isolation well, and that you're doing the right thing and keeping that social distancing going. If there's going to be a word or a phrase of the year, it's going to be social distancing. Now, coming up a little bit later on in the program, our guest tonight is supercar driver Todd Hazelwood. Todd, was going to be a big year for him. He was moving from Matt Stone Racing to Brad Jones Racing, also moving from his home in the Gold Coast down to a new home here in Victoria. However, he sort of got halfway there when all the chaos happened, and we're going to catch up with him from sort of a halfway house somewhere in the Victorian countryside, and we'll be asking him all about his plans for 2020, including, of course, the brand new Supercar E-Series, which is happening right at the start of this week. But, as I said, look, not a lot is happening. Bernie Eccleston, congratulations to Bernie Eccleston, a father at 89 years old. His oldest daughter is 65, which means that basically she will be 86 when her youngest brother turns 21, so something to think about. That's certainly long-term planning. But congratulations, Bernie, well done. I suppose it will be the first of many sort of family boosts that we're going to get over the next few months. So, I mean, not a lot else to do, unless, of course, you're like me and you live at home, living at home alone. Look, while I contemplate that, you just check out this in-pit lane motorsport news. Not a lot happened, but have a look what did happen anyway. With the world still trapped inside a virtual reality, most of the news this week took place exclusively inside a computer. In the world of Formula One, the biggest game in the real world has suddenly found itself at a distinct disadvantage due to its reliance on what is essentially a glorified console game as the platform for its virtual Grand Prix. Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc won the virtual Vietnam Grand Prix, which was somehow held at a virtual Albert Park circuit, which no doubt came complete with virtual Save Albert Park protesters, which is about the only place you can actually find them still alive anymore. Leclerc started from pole, leading all the way. Renault Formula 2 driver Christian Lundegaard had set the fastest time in qualifying, but he received a penalty for his involvement in a crash which dropped him back to 6th place on the grid. Williams driver George Russell, making his official esports debut, finished in 3rd place, an impressive effort, especially as he'd only set up his sim rig a few days earlier. New Zealand supercar driver Andre Heimgartner qualified 15th, but soon found himself off the virtual track, courtesy of former Formula One champion Jenson Button. Despite this, the Kelly Racing driver had a ball.
Just had the first E-Series race and it was pretty cool. It was action-packed. And now I get to say that I was get taken out by Jenson Button, which is pretty cool. Had some good battles there, Latifi, a few other people. Unfortunately, we didn't end up too good, but we had a few spins and obviously went off the track. So good fun, really good to race those guys, and not every day that you get to race them. I'd love to have another go. Obviously, the more you do it, now I've done it, I sort of have the experience of doing it and you know going forward what to do. But I'd love to do it with a bit more time to practice and get myself ready. I think it'd be good fun.
Fellow New Zealand supercar driver Scott McLaughlin has further raised his profile in the United States by winning last weekend's virtual IndyCar race at a virtual Barber Motorsport Park. It was a good day for Antipodean drivers as McLaughlin held off Australia's Will Power for the victory. The Kiwi driver and his real-world Penske race engineer, Jonathan Diagweed, played the strategy to perfection, pitting early before working his way through the field to take the lead from former Formula One driver Scott Speed with 6 laps remaining. Power closed on McLaughlin late in the race but was unable to make his way past, finishing less than half a second behind the New Zealand supercar driver. IndyCar rookie Alex Polo was 3rd ahead of Simon Pagenaud and Felix Rosenqvist. The series will now move on to its first oval track event next week at a virtual Michigan International Speedway.
Start your engine! I'm going! Yeah!
William Byron continued his good iRacing form, dominating the latest round of the NASCAR iRacing series at a virtual Bristol Motor Speedway. For the second week in a row, the driver of the Axelata Chevrolet dominated the virtual race series, pulling away to win from John Hunter Nemechek and race 1 winner Timmy Hill. In the real world of motorsport, I remember that, Currently on hold due to the global pandemic, the ACO and the FIA have announced a radical shake-up of the World Endurance Championship calendar. The current championship, which was to have concluded with the running of the 2020 Le Mans 24-hour race, will now wind up in late November in Bahrain. The big news is the decision to move away from the European winter season, which straddled over 2 years. Also announced was the decision to delay the new hypercar regulations at least until 2022, moving the new regulations in line with those of the American IMSA series. In addition to a new date, currently scheduled for September 19th and 20th, the start time of the 2020 Le Mans 24 Hours has been brought forward to 2:30 local time. The new earlier start time has been requested by both competitors and in particular TV to allow for more daylight running due to the shorter daylight hours and what will no doubt be a very, very cold and probably very wet autumn weekend. The new 2021 World Endurance Championship is now expected to begin with the running of the Sebring round in March next year. And it's looking less and less likely that we'll have any international racing taking place in 2020. With travel restrictions expected to be in place at least until the new year, events like Formula One and the World Endurance Championship now look set to write off the year as a bad dream. Organisers of the British Grand Prix have given themselves until the end of this month before deciding on whether to pull the plug on their race, scheduled for July 19th. However, with many major events around that time, including Wimbledon, already cancelled, it seems highly unlikely that the event could go ahead. But by the time Formula One returns, it may well be old hat, as by then we'll finally be getting those flying cars we were promised would be coming when we were kids back in the 1960s. A South Australian-based company called Allowda claims it's ready to test its new all-electric manned octocopters once the current virus restrictions have been lifted. We believe in open innovation. Looking back to the development of both the car and the aeroplane over a century ago, it was sporting competition that drove progress. We're delighted to work in close collaboration with global regulators and the wider EVTOL industry to bring closer a revolution in airborne mobility, said Matt Pearson, founder of Allowda and the Airspeeder series. The company media release said that the sport promises to be the greatest modern sporting spectacle on the planet, with elite pilots propelled to speeds of 200 kilometres per hour in the largest, most powerful octocopters on the planet. I can't wait. And that's the In-Pit Lane news for the week commencing Monday, the 6th of April 2020. We'll try and get more news next week. Now, when we return from the break, we're going to be joined by our special guest, Todd Hazelwood from Brad Jones Racing. He's going to tell us all about his plans for 2020, how they started, how they sort of got derailed along the way, and hopefully how they'll pick up later on in the year. Also, of course, the brand new Supercar E-Series, which started this week. So that's when In-Pit Lane returns on Channel 31 and Channel 44 right after this break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Joining us on the line now from his secret hideaway somewhere outside of Melbourne is Todd Hazelwood. And Todd, first of all, how are you putting in your lockdown time, and how are you getting on in the wait to get back on the track again?
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre times at the moment. Obviously, it's pretty unprecedented as well. So yeah, look, it's kind of frustrating that we're not racing. Obviously, we're meant to be in Tasmania and getting ready for a race weekend, but obviously the whole situation with the COVID-19, we're just trying to do all the safest precautions possible. And for me, I've been in full isolation for a couple of weeks now, and I can't even see my neighbour's house from where I'm sitting. I'm currently on some family property at the moment, and it's pretty good. But just trying to, I suppose, get ready for this new Supercars E-Series that's kicking off next week. So it's pretty exciting and a new challenge for us all. So it's certainly keeping the mind sharp and active, trying to relearn some new skills and try and get up to speed with that.
Everybody's getting involved with the whole e-racing thing and the whole sim racing. Is this something that you've been involved with for a while? I mean, we know people like Scotty McLaughlin and Shane Van Gisbergen are absolutely addicted to it. They're always online. What about you? Is this something new for you, or have you been running in iRacing and that sort of thing for a while?
Look, I'm probably
Advantages that motorsport has at the moment, isn't it? I mean, we've got the opportunity to go sim racing. I mean, there are games for football and cricket and all those other sports, but nothing that is actually as close to the real thing, I suppose, as sim racing is. You mentioned the setup and all the rest of it. You're running in the new E series a sort of a control setup, I believe, which is being set up by Brody Kotsecki. Have you spoken to Brody at all about? Got any tips from him, because he obviously knows his way around one of these things? So what is he telling you about sim racing? I mean, what are the tips that he's giving to all the people at home right now? I mean, there's a lot of us, I mean, people, particularly of my generation, who weren't really into this sort of thing at all, who are now suddenly getting very interested indeed. So what sort of things is he giving you, the tips to be fast and to be a winner in e-racing?
Yeah, a lot of it comes in the middle of the experience group. You know, I've done some work on simulators before, where I've been pretty fortunate to have access to the one at Motion Force One Sim at Macro Racing over the last few years. But I've never done any online racing, or nothing really heavily involved with iRacing itself either. So for me, it's trying to get up to speed, trying to learn the supercar in that program, and understand how to be fast, because there is certainly a unique technique to be fast in those simulators, and to get the most out of it. And being a true racer, like I think all the guys in the field, they're all spending plenty of hours on that at the moment, trying to beat one another, because they all feel like, especially with pretty, I suppose, relevant equipment, we've all got the same setup. There's no excuses now, so it's a chance to really show what you can do on TV, and hopefully create a great spectacle for everyone watching at home, because obviously we're all in lockdown at the moment. So it's with no other sport on, now's a good chance to make a good impression on some people.
That's one of the advantages that motorsport has at the moment, isn't it? I mean, we've got the opportunity to go sim racing. I mean, there are games for football and cricket and all those other sports, but nothing that is actually as close to the real thing, I suppose, as sim racing is. You mentioned the setup and all the rest of it. You're running in the new E series a sort of a control setup, I believe, which is being set up by Brody Kotsecki. Have you spoken to Brody at all about? Got any tips from him, because he obviously knows his way around one of these things?
I've tried to pick Brody's brain, but he's pretty tight-lipped on everything. And obviously now that he's driving for Erebus, he's got even more of a good reason to probably not share too many secrets with the rest of the pit lane. But for me, I'm pretty fortunate. I've got actually got good access to a professional sim racer in Jack Burden, who actually drove for Brad Jones Racing in the E-Series last year. So between Macaulay and myself, we've been picking his brain a fair bit and trying to understand, what are the differences between obviously the sim in the real life, and how we can try and get an advantage out of it all. So it's quite a cool challenge. As I said, obviously while you're in isolation, it's pretty tough to keep your mind active. But obviously unlike any other sport, at least we can actually do some racing from our living room and have a bit of fun.
So what is he telling you about sim racing? I mean, what are the tips that he's giving to all the people at home right now? I mean, there's a lot of us, I mean, people, particularly of my generation, who weren't really into this sort of thing at all, who are now suddenly getting very interested indeed. So what sort of things is he giving you, the tips to be fast and to be a winner in e-racing?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to actually setting up the game itself, and all the fine settings, and the projection of the screen, all the frame rates of the TV, all these sort of little elements that you would take for granted when you normally plug in your PS4, for example, and just go racing. There's a lot more to it when you're doing a racing online. So there's a lot of little elements that I certainly wasn't aware of, jumping on the sim for the first time, and just trying to get those small elements right. And then from a driving technique point of view, I suppose, some drivers can adapt and get onto it pretty quickly. And for others, it's trying to work out what the exact technique is, because it does glorify a few elements when you get it wrong. So, probably the biggest difference I've found so far is that the braking technique is very different to real life supercar, but also think that's down to the sim equipment that you've got as well. So for me, I'm using a pretty generic sort of sim setup for now. I've got some, trick stuff on the way coming, but probably won't be ready for round one. So I think you just got to try and adapt to the equipment that you got, and try and get the most out of it. Yep. But for me, I'm trying to do it on a budget. You can easily spend a lot of money with the simulator equipment as well. So you're trying to keep that in mind, and be sensible with that element. But at the same time, make sure that I'm in a position where I can hopefully challenge for some good results.
So what sort of gear have you got at the moment? I mean, are you getting into all the whole thing about, like what sort of processor and what sort of GPU you have and all those sorts of things? What are you running the program on?
Yeah, I've learnt a lot over the last couple of weeks. To tell you what, I knew nothing about computers and simulators, and it's been a information overload over the last couple of weeks. I tell you, but I was pretty fortunate. I had a computer built by a friend a few years ago, so I was pretty sorted in that department. But I didn't actually have a cockpit or anything like that. So literally, I was the guy that was running a G27 steering wheel on just a computer desk with a TV in front of me. So I've had to adapt and change that up a little bit. So I've been fortunate to be working with Next Level Racing. They provided me with a new cockpit, so everything's now in a proper design. So I've got a race seat and everything like that. Still using a Logitech wheel for now, but I've got some new stuff on the way. So hopefully I'll have that for round one. If not, we'll definitely be in for round two. So as I said, trying to make the most of what I've got for now, and hopefully it does the job.
Well, as we saw the other day in the NASCAR pro race, I mean, Timmy Hill won that race, and he's very much got the old steering wheel bolted to the kitchen table stuff, and he ended up winning that race. So obviously, you can get by with something pretty basic. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
okay, look. We're going to take a bit of a break now on In Pit Lane, but when we come back, we'll catch up again with Todd Hazelwood and we'll find out more about what he's doing away from the world of sim racing and with real racing when we get back. You're watching In Pit Lane on C31 and C44. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to In Pit Lane, coming to you live from the lockdown. And joining us tonight is Todd Hazelwood, driver for Brad Jones Racing in the world of supercars. We've been talking about the E-Series. And racing virtually, but real world racing, you actually have been behind the wheel. You were lucky enough to get at least one round in and a bit of practice and qualifying at Albert Park as well. So, how do you think you were looking forward to for 2020? New team for you. How do you think the season was looking?
Oh, I was super excited. A lot of preparation went in behind the scenes leading into the first round at Adelaide, and obviously the first round all happened very quickly with a test day on the Tuesday and then straight into racing on Thursday. So it was a pretty fast-paced start of the year, and I think the team and I did a really good job for our first hit out together at Adelaide. We're on track for a top 10 result on Sunday, and unfortunately we had a little fuel calculation issue and we had to make an extra pit stop. So for us to potentially get a top 10 result in our first weekend working together, new environment, new staff, new engineer, completely different car and driving style for me to get my head around as well. So, for us to roll out with that sort of, those initial steps were quite promising, I felt. And even though we didn't get much of an idea of Grand Prix, I think the initial feel in the car and the steps that we're making forward has been really good. So I've been, I think that's why I'm partly frustrated. I just haven't been able to get the chance to really sink my teeth into it a little bit harder and see what she can really do. But I feel like there's some fantastic potential there, both with the team and also the car as well. They've got a few exciting developments going on behind the scenes that they've been working over the Christmas break and then implemented into Adelaide. And there's a bit of an up and down sort of weekend, but I think that's got to be expected when there was so many new elements plugged in for the first round. So overall, I'm happy. I'm excited to go back racing when we can. When that is, I'm not really sure. Obviously, we've got at the moment we're meant to be going racing at Winton, but obviously with the whole COVID-19 situation, it's a bit of a moving target. So just got to keep the head down and keep working away. And when we do go racing, we're fit and ready to go.
You've been racing for a long, long time. I mean, you started in karts when you were about 7 years old, and I think you're still racing karts, aren't you?
Yes, now and then. I love my karting. My girlfriend races as well, so it's a good excuse to go out to the go-kart track and do a few laps myself. But I really enjoy the grassroots element and gets a fair bit of enjoyment out of it. So it's good fun.
Is there much that you, in terms of keeping fine-tuned over the season, is there much that you can take from karting? I know Scott McLaughlin is also somebody who likes to get behind the wheel of a kart. A few of the guys do, and I mean, even up to Formula One level, we've seen guys who still like to get out in the kart and tune up again. What does karting do for a young driver? I mean, in terms of learning the ropes and making you a better driver in larger formula like supercars and beyond.
Yeah, there's quite a few elements to it, and there's some mixed opinions of whether or not it's the right thing to do when you're jumping out of a go-kart. Obviously, your left foot braking, it's direct direct drive, and it's only a two-wheel, or say a rear axle brake. So it's a very different style to drive compared to a supercar, obviously. But I think if you take certain elements out of it and treat it for what it's worth, I think that's the key thing, to use it as a training tool. So for myself, obviously, especially in the off season of supercars, although it's a pretty tight turnaround, any time that you can keep your backside in the seat is a good day. So for me, I like to keep the mind sharp and keep the reflexes up and work on the body and keep that match fitness going, because there's certainly an element of mental fatigue that you get when you've been out of the race car for a long time. So just keeping from that element, keeping that sharp and trying to, I suppose, still use those sensory inputs that you're using. So, you're feeling how the tyre works, how a certain tyre pressure manipulates the setup, or a certain chassis change will make. So it's just, it's using the brain to try and keep rehearsing that element. And then obviously, for myself, I like to do a little bit of racing as well. So trying to do it in the safest possible environment to ensure that that doesn't impact my supercars program. But at the same time, the kart racing is some of the most hardcore racing that you can do. The start's always the fast and furious. Everyone's out there to try and beat one another, and it's really hardcore. As supercars, although the racing is good, it's totally different style. So I really like the hardcore racing element of it, and I think me personally, I get a lot out of that.
What about future plans? I mean, well, obviously, when young guys get into the world of karting, I mean, we've had a lot of karters on the show over the years, and the first thing they say is, I want to go to Formula One. I mean, there are international options out there now, or hopefully when we get back, there will still be international options with things like GT Racing and the Asian Le Mans Series, TCR, all sorts of international categories that you can drive in these days. Is that something you're looking at long term? Would you like to perhaps head overseas at some stage, and what direction would you like to go in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've actually just started to explore a couple options outside of supercars. Nothing certainly to be detrimental to my supercars career. Don't get me wrong, because I've got a lot of goals that I'd like to achieve in the supercars championship before I even think about doing something else. I've certainly got a lot of unfinished business, and I've only really just started to, I suppose, plant a seed in the supercars championship. So for me, unfinished business there. But for me, I'd love to probably try and replicate a bit like what Chaz Mostert's done with his GT program. Obviously, get it to a point where you can position yourself where you can still race full time in a supercars championship, but also have another challenge of driving some international circuits and teaming up some fantastic teams and drivers in the process. And a bit like the go-karting element, the more time you can spend right behind the wheel, the more beneficial it is, I believe. And if I can get to a point where I can, be driving cars around the world, that certainly wouldn't be a bad problem to have. But as for now, full focus on the Supercars Championship, and hopefully once we get through this COVID-19 madness, we can start working on those goals. Once we start getting some firmer results in the Supercars program.
Do you have a bucket list event, something that you would really like to you do more than anything else? The one thing you'd like to say, yep, that's what I want to do. I'll be happy just to do that race.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably a bit left of field actually, but it's actually the Dakar Rally. I'd love to do that. I've watched that since a kid. It was actually my dad's dream on a motorbike to do that. So whether or not there's an opportunity in years to come where, say, my dad and I maybe team up in a buggy, something with a roof over our head, and take that on, I think there's no greater challenge. It's tough for so many reasons. Obviously, the biggest motorsport event in the world, so I'd love to do that. And obviously, there's many other events like Le Mans, and I'd love to race at Monaco and something, or even the Macau Grand Prix. But yeah, Dakar's at the top of that list.
Well, good luck with that, and of course, good luck with the E-Series. Hopefully, you do well in both of them. But I think we're all hanging out for the real thing when it comes back, hopefully later on this year. But for now, stay safe. In try and enjoy your time in isolation. But for now, Todd Hazelwood, thanks for joining us in Pit Lane.
No worries. No, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you to Todd Hazelwood for making himself available. Hopefully we'll have some more news from some of the supercar drivers and others in the local motorsport scene very soon. Now, you might remember last week on the program, I promised you we'd be going sort of deep-dive nerding into the wonderful world of race car engineering. Now, because of the interview with Todd Hazelwood, we sort of put that on the back burner, but that is coming up next week. We're going to be joined by a guy called Andrew Mather, and Andrew is a leading engineer with Jaguar Land Rover in the UK. but he's also had a long experience with Formula Student, Formula SAE UK as well. And we spoke about Formula Student, Formula SAE, where it stands in the current situation and what we might see in the future. So if you're into, as I said last week, if you're into sort of race car engineering and real sort of deep dive engineering nerd stuff, next week is a program you should be watching. Remember, if you'd like to keep in touch with us here at In Pit Lane, do go to our email address and send us a message. It's theshow@inpitlane.com. Remember, we are on YouTube. Go to the YouTube page, like, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. That way, whenever we put something up live, you'll be notified about that. We're also on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're all over the place. We're not on TikTok yet. Don't know what TikTok is. Don't want to know what TikTok is. But in the meantime, look, once again, stay safe, everybody. Stay calm. I mean, all we're being asked to do is stay inside and enjoy ourselves, really. So relax, put in your time productively, and we'll see you next week for another edition of In Pit Lane. So until we see you once again, on behalf of everybody involved in the program, from all of us, it's bye for now.